And I know I've personally talked with some veterans who are amazed by the jump in benefits from 70% to 100%. You know, when they see a 30% increase, they're thinking of the regular math we learned in school.
What people need to understand about veterans benefits is that they don't progress arithmetically, they progress geometrically. So a 10% rating, for example, is, I forget this year's number, but it's around $150 a month. And if you get up to about 70%, it's around $1,700, $1,800 a month. But if you go from 70% to 100%, suddenly you're up to almost $4,000 a month. And so it's not a linear arithmetic progression, it's a geometric progression. So it's like a hockey stick. You go, so it's very important for folks who are at the 70 and even 80, 90% ratings. That last jump from 90 to 100 is huge in the VA's payment system.
Welcome to the Victory Over VA podcast, a podcast about empowering veterans to overcome denied disability claims. Each week, we deliver critical insights to help you understand the disability process, veterans' benefits, and how to take control of your legal rights. Now here's your host, Attorney Francis Jackson.
Welcome to Victory Over VA. If you're a veteran struggling with the VA's disability system, or just want to make sure you're getting the benefits you've earned, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an update that could change your life. I'm Christian Terrison, here with renowned veterans disability attorney Francis Jackson of Jackson and MacNichol. Jack has dedicated his career to helping veterans like you win the benefits you deserve, recovering millions of dollars for thousands of heroes. This podcast isn't just for veterans navigating the system, though. It's for their families, their friends, and anyone else who wants to stand shoulder to shoulder with those who served. So stick around, because we're here to make sure you get the support you need. Today's show is about sort of a core demographic of people we work with, those veterans who find themselves getting to a combined rating of 70%, and it seems like that's the ceiling for them, regardless of, you know, the evidence they're filing, how many supplemental claims or appeals they do. They can't get through that 70% ceiling. So what's the first thing that a VA disability attorney would look for in a case like that?
Well, obviously you'd want to look at all the factors that are going on, but probably the first thing you want to look at is whether the veteran is able to still be employed. And second, you want to look at what makes up that 70% rating. For example, you would want to know, is there a single condition rated at 60%, or is there within the combined 70% a single rating at 40% or higher? And the reason you'd want to know those things is that if the veteran's conditions, whatever they are severe enough that they keep the veteran from working at a full-time, substantial level, then there is a special benefit that may be available. It's called total disability based on individual unemployability. And that's such a mouthful that everybody just abbreviates it to TDIU or IU. But what that is a recognition by the VA that even though a person's disabilities may not come to 100% in the unusual combined rating system that the VA uses, the disabilities may still be severe enough that the person is unable to work full-time. And so if the person is not working and they're at a combined rating of 70% or a single rating of 60%, or they're at 80% or 90%, any of those, it may be possible for the VA to pay them at the 100% level, which is approximately $4,000 a month. So it's important to look at everything that's going on in the case and to see if a veteran might be potentially eligible for this special benefit, TDIU, or total disability based on individual unemployability. And that is usually available for veterans who have a combined rating of 70% or higher. That's not 100% of the time, but generally speaking, that is true.
Yeah. And I wanted to focus on one of the things that you mentioned in talking about that IU definition and saying that symptoms are such that a veteran is unable to work full-time, because that's something that in the cases I've worked on, I've had to explain to many veterans and emphasize to them that the nature of the type of work that they're able to do does matter.
Oh, it does.
So can you talk a little bit about that in case there's somebody out there who may be at 70%, but is a paid groundskeeper at their church, or
Sure.
Works in a
Sure.
family business, something like
Sure.
that?
Well, there are actually a couple categories, but let me take the obvious one first. For people who are employed, whether it's part-time or even full-time, but the total earnings are less than the federal poverty level number for a family of one for the particular year. And I stress it's for the particular year because it changes each year. But right now it's approximately $14,000. So say you're working part-time and you earned $1,000 every month. And understand that's gross earnings before any taxes are taken out, any of that sort of thing. But say you earn $12,000 gross. You would still potentially be eligible for the VA to pay you at the 100% rate based on individual unemployability, assuming that you can show that your combined VA service-connected disabilities are what keeps you from working at a more significant level. So say, for example, you have PTSD, and because you have difficulty getting along with other people sometimes, and sometimes you can get irritable or angry or withdrawn and just not able to work around lots of other people, deal with unhappy customers, that sort of thing. It may be that if you're at 70% for PTSD, the vocational folks would say that it really is a condition that precludes you from working at a higher level or in a more stressful position or when we had to deal with more people, or whatever it is. So it's critical for those folks who are rated at 70, 80, 90, or even at 60 for a single condition, that we look at whether there is this alternative path to 100% benefits.
Another way that I know I've personally helped many veterans seemingly stuck at that limitation is through identifying secondary conditions that may have been overlooked. Can you talk a little bit about those types of conditions?
Sure. One of the things that happens is that there are people who are not at 70% combined, but should be. And so, for example, I was working on a case with another attorney in the firm yesterday, and we were looking at the fact that this particular veteran suffers from bipolar disorder, but also has migraine headaches, and did some research in the medical literature, and it turns out that bipolar is a condition which often causes people to have migraine headaches. And so the strategy we're going to employ in that case is to argue that the service-connected bipolar condition is actually the cause of the migraines, that they are really an element or a secondary condition stemming from the bipolar disorder. And it appears that it's pretty likely we can establish, number one, that the migraines are secondary, and number two, that when the migraines are considered in addition to the bipolar disorder, he should be at 70 or perhaps higher. It looks like he might actually qualify for 90%, but it doesn't matter. As long as you're at 70 or higher, because it is keeping him from working, we can then look at whether it's going to be possible to get him to 100% payment based on TDIU.
And I know I've personally talked with some veterans who are amazed by the jump in benefits from 70% to 100%. You know, that when they see a 30% increase, they're thinking of the regular math we learned in school. Can you talk a little bit about the VA's math in those benefits and how it's one of the cases where it can work out in the veteran's favor?
Absolutely. What people need to understand about veterans benefits is that they don't progress arithmetically, they progress geometrically. So a 10% rating, for example, is, I forget this year's number, but it's around $150 a month. And if you get up to about 70%, it's around $1,700, $1,800 a month. But if you go from 70% to 100%, suddenly you're up to almost $4,000 a month. And so it's not a linear arithmetic progression, it's a geometric progression. So it's like a hockey stick. You go, shh. So it's very important for folks who are at the 70 and even 80, 90% ratings. That last jump from 90 to 100 is huge in the VA's payment system. So it's really important to pay attention to, number one, where you are, and number two, more importantly, if you're unable to work or unable to work at a substantial level, why that is. And one other piece of that you touched on briefly, but we kind of got away from, is the VA also recognizes that even if you are earning above the federal poverty level, it may be that your earnings are still significantly impaired by your service-connected disabilities, and that you are being protected from competition in the ordinary labor market. So you mentioned family businesses. That's one of the prime examples, but there are others. For example, there's a great case from the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims about a gentleman who was a park ranger, but he was a veteran, his boss is a veteran, the boss was familiar with his various problems and gave him all kinds of accommodations. He didn't have to go out on night calls, he didn't have to be on call like other people. He didn't have to carry a gun, even though they do some law enforcement duties. He didn't have to respond to emergencies. There were just a whole litany of duties that were ordinarily required that he was excused from by his boss specifically because of his service-connected disabilities and PTSD and depression in that case, but it doesn't matter what the cause is. So if you're a veteran, even if you're earning money at above the poverty level, if your earnings are still being substantially impaired because of your combination of service-connected disabilities, you may still be entitled to individual unemployability benefits on top of your salary.
And I know for, the benefit of viewers who might be watching, who might see some of our videos online, naming really significant life-changing benefits awards, those big dollar awards are almost exclusively in that, jump from 70% or 60-70% to 100%.
Yes.
And so those are folks who, by definition, have already been turned down or got a lower rating than they felt like they deserved.
Yep.
But I guess when looking at that kind of award, the other factor is essentially time. And how can you advise the veterans who might be watching on how to ensure that they're getting paid for the time period that their condition impacts?
Well, in a word, appeal. What happens to a lot of veterans is they're in a tough financial position, they're trying to get benefits, and they get turned down. And they panic because they've been told that, oh, if you appeal, it'll take years. Well, if you appeal, it may take years. But the important thing is, when you win, you get paid for those years if you appeal. If you don't appeal, if you start a new claim, then whatever time you've been waiting just goes poof, just gone. No retroactive benefits for that period. And it just pains me to hear the advice that a lot of veterans get. They get told, oh, you don't want to take an appeal, it'll take too long, take too long. But, I see people who apply and get turned down and don't appeal. And so they reapply and they get turned down and they don't appeal. And they reapply again and they get turned down and they don't appeal. And now it's 7 years later. If they had just appealed, they probably would already have the benefits by now, and they would have been paid retroactively for that period. It's just so sad to see that people just go off and leave money on the table by not appealing.
Well, and we get, some clients who are concerned about the costs and fees of hiring representation, of getting an experienced VA disability attorney. Mm-hmm. But honestly, the cost to not have that kind of expertise and advocate in your corner can be much higher.
Sadly, that's true. As one client said to me one time, he said, I don't begrudge the 20%. I had 100% of nothing. Now I've got 80% of something.
Yeah. And for those who are curious about the details, we have a whole episode of the podcast breaking down how the fee process works. It's the contingent fee process, how it's set up actually by the VA, and all those juicy details that we are often asked about. But before I get off on that point too far, one thing I wanted to ask about before we finish up is many veterans, especially at that 70% level, will be focused on physical conditions, knees, back in particular. But can you talk a little bit about mental health conditions and how those can make a big difference too?
Sure. Yeah, one of the things that I learned years ago when I was doing primarily Social Security disability law before we started doing more VA is that when people lose the ability to work and have physical problems that cause pain and less functionality, can't do the kinds of things they used to do, don't feel like themselves anymore, it's depressing. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. It's depressing. People talk about getting the blues, but what they're really talking about is depression. And it obviously ranges in severity. I mean, certainly lots of veterans with physical problems who are suffering have mild levels of depression. There are some people who have very severe levels of depression, but it's usually relatively mild. And what many veterans miss out on in terms of the VA benefits piece is that if you have a modest level of depression that's brought on by your physical symptoms, that is a complication of your physical problems. It is a secondary condition. The VA will compensate you for that. And so if, say, you're at 50% combined for physical problems, say you've got problems with your back and radiculopathy down both legs, and the combined rating is 50%, in all probability, you're also suffering at least a mild level of depression. And if you raise that with the VA and get it adjudicated, that will probably put you at the 70% level combined, where, as we've talked about earlier, you're potentially eligible for TDIU and payment at the 100% level, which won't make all of your problems go away, but it will insulate you from some of the bumps in the road.
All right. And that's it for this episode of Victory Over VA. Thank you for tuning in. Please be sure to like and subscribe and join us again next week.
Hope to see you then.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Victory Over VA podcast. Make sure to visit our website, veteransbenefits.com/podcast, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, If you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you like this show, you might want to check out our free consultation to see how we can help you with your denied claim. Simply go to veteransbenefits.com and fill out the form. You fought for us. Now let us fight for you. And be sure to tune in next week for our next episode.